San Francisco in the 1970s is, to put it mildly, not the most obvious setting for a first-person spatial puzzle game. But Mad About Pandas chose exactly that, which is conceptually quite cool. Afros, audio cassettes, colorful jackets, an evil corporation, biker gangs, and all that jazz, plus a mysterious glitch slowly spreading across the entire city. It sounds fresh and promising, but once you start looking at the details, questions arise. Yerba Buena is a puzzle platformer built around a copy-paste mechanic for transferring physical properties. In the genre, it has an obvious benchmark, Portal. The comparison suggests itself not in the game's favor. Not because Yerba Buena is outright bad, but because Portal sets the bar where its competitor falters. Consistency, precise controls, and smart implementation of object physics. Yerba Buena has interesting mechanics and a conceptually attractive world, but it lacks physical believability. Let's go through it step by step. The protagonist, Barb, has just moved to San Francisco and can't find a job. On the day of yet another failed interview, she and her friend Russell, a taxi driver, get caught in a biker gang raid. A biker nicknamed Bear kidnaps Russell but accidentally drops a briefcase containing a mysterious device, the oscillator. Barb picks it up, figures out how it works, and sets off to rescue her friend. Very soon comes a twist. It turns out the entire San Francisco is not real. It's a video game world. Barb is an NPC in it, and Bear is the player character. This is hinted at by malfunctioning game markers, the inability to leave the city, and conversations about cars driving in loops, very much in the spirit of The Truman Show or Free Guy. The story then branches out. An evil corporation is buying up city parks to build towers and offices, while audio diaries from the developers of this game world surface in the background. At one point, it even touches on a topical theme, AI. The narrative is delivered in jagged episodes. It sometimes feels like the writers were coming up with the next twist on the fly. Yet there's sincerity and humor in the story. It genuinely hooks you and motivates you to push forward. The oscillator is essentially a radar gun with a cassette slot because it's the 70s. Its basic function is to copy the movement vector of any object and transfer that vector to another object in a glitched state. There's a spinning fan, copy it and apply it to a glitched car, now the car spins like the fan. See a moving elevator, copy it and apply it to a platform, the platform starts moving upward. There's also a scanner that highlights objects. Orange ones you can copy properties from, and blue ones you can apply them to. At the beginning, everything feels very fresh, especially the first puzzle where you literally move entire sections of residential buildings and use them as platforms. As you progress, new properties are added to the basic movement copying. These are unlocked via cassettes inserted into the oscillator. Gaseous state makes an object lose its physical form, allowing you or other objects to pass through it. Elasticity makes an object bounce away anything that touches it, with bounce height depending on how high you jump onto it. Properties can be stacked on a single object. You can make a platform move to the right while also rotating, for example. But you can't apply two different movement directions to one object, one overwrites the other. The gradual increase in complexity is well structured. Each new property is first introduced in a dedicated tutorial zone, an amusement park that serves as a training ground, and then integrated into the main puzzles. In the second half of the game, you're no longer just applying one property but building entire chains. Move an object, make it gaseous, push it through a wall, remove the gaseous state, and all in the correct order. Puzzles become multi-step, and some even span multiple areas of a level instead of being confined to a single room. One thing the game does well is level design in terms of spatial scope. Yerba Buena doesn't lock you in one room with one set of objects. Many puzzles are designed so that you have to search for the solution across several points of the level, move between zones, and keep track of what's where and in what state. The open space encourages a different kind of thinking compared to traditional room-based puzzles. The first half of the game is light and almost comedic in tone. You move cars to create a bridge across the street, shift half a residential building to reach the opposite roof, and smash corporate offices to pieces. In the second half, the tone shifts, lasers, bottomless abysses, grindstones appear, and difficulty spikes sharply. Levels become longer, puzzles more complex, and the cost of failure rises. This is where the main problems begin. Barb cannot die in the usual sense. If you fall into an abyss or enter a dangerous zone, the game simply rewinds you back. The issue is that checkpoints are placed unevenly. In some puzzles, especially the large-scale ones, the respawn point is at the very beginning of the section. If you miss a platform in the middle of a multi-step puzzle, the game sends you back to the start. And it doesn't just reset you, all the objects you've moved are reset as well. Start over. I ran into this fairly early and it happened several times in a row. It's not catastrophic, but it starts to get infuriating. Especially when you realize that death doesn't really exist in this game, yet backtracking due to poorly placed checkpoints punishes you even harder. It's an unpleasant flaw because it shows up exactly where the most interesting parts are in the big, open puzzles. Control issues add to the frustration. It works fine in normal situations, but as soon as platforming combines with simultaneous use of the oscillator, things get difficult. The character sometimes catches on invisible obstacles, jumps occasionally don't register at full height, and you fall. With the elastic objects, you need to hit the trampoline at exactly the right angle to bounce in the desired direction. So yes, you mess up, but not because there's something wrong with you, but because that's how the mechanics work. There are also occasional frame rate drops, especially when moving the camera quickly. I've had complaints about the visuals since the demo, and they haven't gone away. Yerba Buena's art style is stylized and deliberately drawn, somewhat reminiscent of Telltale games. The color palette is rich, and the 70s are conveyed recognizably through details like cassettes, hairstyles, and clothing. But the overall picture doesn't quite hold up. Animations look stiff, and facial animations in cutscenes sometimes don't sync with speech. Particles and special effects are decent, and the comic-style elements add stylization, but the main visual realization of the world stays at the level of a very average indie game. Honestly, the world stops being visually interesting almost immediately after you step out of the car at the very beginning. While driving, it's still entertaining to look around, but afterward there's simply not much to see. If you compare it to Portal, Antechamber, The Talos Principle, or Superliminal, those games have much more visual cohesion and eye-catching solutions. Here it feels like they tried, but something didn't quite work out. On the other hand, the sound design is one of the few aspects with almost no complaints. Surprisingly for the setting, the soundtrack contains neither blues, disco, nor funk. The voice acting is excellent, the humor is delivered well through intonation, and the writing is solid. Yerba Buena is an interesting product with an unusual approach to puzzles. The oscillator works well, the progression is reasonably built, and I really liked the idea of large, complex puzzles. Despite the somewhat jagged narrative structure, the story keeps you engaged. However, the physics and controls aren't refined enough for the kind of puzzles the game asks you to solve. The checkpoints are frustrating, and the visual execution leaves much to be desired. Unfortunately, Yerba Buena can't stand up to many of its genre peers in comparison, but it's still a solid indie puzzle platformer that will find its audience, players who are hungry for this kind of adventure.